We are going to be in Psalm 131 this morning. As you can tell, I'm at home today. Didn't make it over to the office. Did one in home where most of us, a lot of us anyway, have been spending our time. So appreciate my family for indulging me and letting me do this and being quiet and everything as we go along. But anyway, that's where I am this morning, and I'm thankful you're listening wherever you might be listening this morning as well. But in Psalm 131, we're going to talk about how to calm your soul. How to calm your soul. Well, you need a little bit of that nowadays, I think. And what Jesus did for us on the cross is ultimately what's going to calm our soul anyway. In all this craziness that we're living in, only Jesus Christ can calm our soul and His Spirit, resting in what He's done for us. So I know there's a lot of t-shirts, a lot of posters out there that are like, keep calm, you know, all the keep calm posters that you've probably seen, kind of a flavor of the last year or two. There's a lot of different variations, you know, they're just keep calm and carry on. That was the original one. Then there's the keep calm, oh, who are we kidding, when I saw that one. And that's kind of how we all feel. How can I keep calm with everything that's going on? Who is calm at this moment, right? Then there's the keep calm and act like you know what you're doing. That's always a good one. And but these all came about, the keep calm and carry on poster actually came about in 1939 in World War II over in England. In the United Kingdom, it was sort of a propaganda to tell the people to keep calm because they were really worried, really concerned about being bombed during World War II. And they were scared and fearful that bombs might drop at any moment. So these posters were sent out that just said, keep calm and carry on, you know, don't worry, don't be afraid. And, you know, honestly, those posters turned out to be shallow propaganda, really, because they had reason to be concerned, we know now. The UK was bombed many times. So the posters that said keep calm sort of disconnected from the reality that those folks were living in, the crisis that was going on around them. And I think in many ways today, we are the same way. When we're told to keep calm, we can sort of feel like that's disconnected from the reality that we're living in right now, this crisis that we're all living in. And so when somebody says be calm, keep calm or whatever, I don't know, it just hits us wrong sometimes. I've learned in my marriage, one of the most offensive things that I can tell my wife to do is calm down. You know, if we're in an intense moment of fellowship and I say to her, honey, just calm down. I am calm, she'll tell me, and that's not necessarily the best thing I can do. I figured that out. Not a good button to push at all. But none of us like to be calmed down. I saw a little poster or something here a while back that said, never in the history of ever has anybody ever calmed down after being told to calm down. So, you know, there's a whole lot of us that don't really care for being told calm down, especially when we're kind of twisted up in the first place. But we long to be calm, honestly. Our spirits do long for that. We don't want to calm down, but we long for calm in our lives. Doug McMillon is the CEO to Walmart now, and in an interview he talked about how what they've seen in the buying patterns as we've gone through the last few weeks of this pandemic, and it shows a longing for calmness that we have even during this global pandemic. He said, of course, you remember in the first weeks, everybody was buying toilet paper and paper towels and perishable items like that, kind of stocking their cabinets up and stuff. The second wave of buying, people started buying games, crossword puzzles, paints, books to occupy their mind, educate their kids and stuff like that. And he said the last several weeks, 6 or 7 weeks ago, people have started buying personal grooming products. At least they're wanting to have a few things that look normal. At least we can look normal, right? We can look like we always do. So what he was saying was that the buying patterns they've seen in Walmart in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, we have kind of gone back to a place where we just long for the normal. Anybody else tired of hearing coronavirus stuff 24/7? I know I am. And we look for this place of calm. We look for this place of normalcy. And but we don't want people to tell us to be calm. But we really want to be calm. Even when things are crazy around us, we long for that calmness. And here's the reality. This global pandemic that we're living in, which is, it's turmoil all around us, guys. And it's not just about us, it's about everybody all around us. And it impacts us internally, even though it's external to us. It's happening around us, it's external, but it impacts us on the inside. And psychologists say that whatever level of anxiety, that whatever level of stress that you entered into this pandemic in, you've only gone up from that. Wherever you started, you've only gone up since we've gone into this. It's just escalated as we've gone into this season. So we desire calmness in our lives, but in this moment, we've got this internal turmoil at some level that we're trying to deal with. And we're all in different places as we're struggling with the things that we're struggling with, but we are all struggling. Even though we want to be calm, we don't like to be told to be calm. But we're going to look at this psalm today, Psalm 131. And this message about the Christian faith is so good for us right now because, you know, the message of the Christian faith is not yelling at you, be calm. It's not be calm and carry on, or you be calm, you be calm. That's not the message of the Christian faith. The Christian message is much better than that. The Christian faith message is actually this. He calms us. He calms us. Not that we calm ourselves down, but that He is the one that does the calming of us. Not that we can calm ourselves down by ourselves. We remind ourselves that we're already accepted, we're already approved of because of what Jesus did on the cross for us. And that on Him, all of our sin was laid. On Him, all of our guilt was placed. All of our shame was placed on Him. And we can be calm because we can remember what He has done for us. The gospel quiets our hearts and it calms our minds because we remember we're already approved, we're already accepted, we're already His because of what He's done. So let's read this very short, beautiful psalm, and then we will dig out of it. It's just three verses long, so let's look at this. It says, Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor my eyes lofty. Neither do I concern myself with great matters, nor with things too profound for me. Surely I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with his mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forever. That's it. That's all of it. That's all of 131. Many people memorize this psalm because it's so short, just three verses, but it's also powerful, guys. Right where you're at, whether you're in your living room, in your car, wherever you're listening from, in your office, you can read this psalm to yourself and just let it soak in. Can you say, I have calmed and quieted my soul, like it says in verse 1? Charles Spurgeon is a famous preacher from London years ago, and he said of Psalm 131, it's a short psalm, but it's a long one to learn. He said, it's short on read, but long on learn. You know, it's hard to do that, isn't it? And we're going to talk about it more here in a minute. But it's hard to be quiet and calm your soul in a time of stress. Whether there's a storm outside, tornado season in Arkansas, we just had some come through and really tear stuff up. We can get really scared. Hurricanes. It always amazed me watching hurricanes, how those hurricane tracking airplanes can ride through those hurricanes and feel all the bumping and the shaking and the wind and the shuddering of the planes and how rough it gets as they're flying through there. But then they come to a point where they just kind of pop out into it and there's no bumping. It's just peace, smooth flying. And it's always fascinating when that happens. It is to me, when that plane just pops out into what they call the eye wall, and it's in the center of the storm. And I'm sure you've seen it before. It's really fascinating as they go through there. It's almost eerie when you think about it. Everything is calm and cool, just a little ways out from it, it's super crazy and chaotic, but everything's calm on the inside. Friend, don't you want that? I want that for you. I want it for me. And that's what the psalmist is talking about. That even though everything's crazy on the outside, I can be calm on the inside. And I don't know, it's like my soul can be the eye of the hurricane, the center of the storm. I can be calm even though everything else around me is crazy. And I want you to know, I don't believe that Psalm 131 is some kind of magic pill for every struggle that you have in your life. I know that this is something that God uses. I know it's true, and I believe I'm going to preach it with conviction today because the Lord has used this psalm in my life this weekend. Yesterday, as I was coming together with something to preach and trying to pray about the decision whether to go back to church or not, there's a lot of pressures in both directions, and it's hard to know what to do. And I've struggled. I've been praying for peace, and that's a lot of where this sermon comes from, I think. So pray for me. I need your prayers too. I'm just like everybody else. I need peace in my heart and in my soul and the decisions that I make. So there are times when God has used this even in my life. Okay? But I also know it's not meaning that you don't ever need something else. There are times when we need a medicinal cure for our anxiety. There are times when we need to talk to someone or something like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are oftentimes other means that are needed to quiet our soul and stuff like that. But I believe God's using 131 of Psalms today, and we're talking about just a normal upsettedness in our hearts due to everything that's going on around us. There's a Christian counselor that I really have read a lot about or from. His name is David Paulison, and he actually passed away last year. And I read one of his articles just a week or two ago, and it's a big article, but it's so good. He wrote this for the Journal of Biblical Counseling, and it's an article he wrote about Psalm 131. And he wrote this talking about how to quiet yourself, how to calm your soul in the midst of all this craziness. And listen to what he says. He says, the person who is quiet on the inside is who he's talking about. He's not noisy. He's not obsessed. He's not on the edge. The to-do list and pressures to achieve don't consume him. Ambition doesn't churn inside of him. Failure and despair doesn't haunt him. Regrets don't corrode his inner experience. Irritation and dissatisfaction don't devour him. He is quiet. Man, I mean, don't you want that in your life? Don't you want your soul to be quiet in that kind of way? Where if there's a failure, you don't despair, it doesn't haunt you. If you have a regret, those don't corrode your inner spirit and hurt you that way. Where there's dissatisfaction, it doesn't devour and consume you. Don't you want that kind of soul calmness, that quietness of soul? Well, that's what Psalm 131 is talking about. There's a phrase in it for calmed and quieted that can actually be translated leveled and smooth, that I've leveled and smoothed things out. Don't you wish your soul could be level and smooth? Not choppy and lumpy like waters, but just smooth water. I want that for your soul. I want it for my soul too, but I want it for your soul. But if we're honest, a lot of times we don't live that way, do we? That's not our real experience. Oftentimes we let our souls get bumpy instead of being calm in the midst of the storm. Our soul, instead of being calm in the storm, it reflects the storm, and we find ourselves choppy and stuff like that as well. And this counselor said he wrote what he called the anti-psalm. And I'm going to put that up here in just a minute too. But the anti-psalm is what he wrote to go on the other side of what Psalm 131 said. Okay? Now, he went to college at Harvard. His roommate led him to the Lord, and he became a counselor. And he was counseling people that struggled with this inner turmoil and not being calm when things got a little bit crazy. So he wrote this anti-psalm, the opposite of 131. And I just wondered what your life may sound like, the one that we read in the Bible a minute ago, or maybe this anti-psalm as I read it to you. So here's his anti-psalm. Again, this is not in the Bible. This is just his opposite of Psalm 131, okay? He says, "Self, my heart is proud, my eyes are haughty, and I chase after things too great and too difficult for me. So of course I'm noisy and restless inside. And it comes naturally, like a hungry infant fussing in his mother's lap. Like a hungry infant, I'm restless with my demands and worries. I scatter my hopes to everything and everybody all the time." He says, that's why my soul is bumpy. That's why my soul is choppy. I scatter my hopes and everything and everybody and anything and everything. Instead of setting my hope on Christ, I try to put it on everything else. So I want my soul to be level and calm and smooth, and I want that for you too. And there's three things in Psalm 131 that I want us to look at, and it's sort of a progression here in this psalm. Three things I want to talk to us about getting straight so that we can be calm and quieted in our spirit. The first thing I want to mention is to get off the ladder. And what I'm talking about is we often hear about climbing the corporate ladder, climbing the ladder in life to try to get ahead and get where you want to go. That's not a great analogy. I get the point of that, wanting to be going forward and such as that, but it's not a great way to live. Living life on the ladder is how most of us do live. We're constantly climbing and striving, but when you're on the ladder, and think about when you're climbing a regular ladder. I mean, you don't feel secure. Often when people climb a ladder, they want someone holding the ladder for them. So especially if they have to go up really high to accomplish what they're trying to, they want somebody to hold it, or they check it before they get on it to make sure it's solid. So they don't feel secure on the ladder. You don't feel safe on the ladder. And living on the ladder, if we all lived on the ladder, that means somebody's always above you and somebody's always below you, right? And if somebody's always above you, you're always looking up at them, constantly trying to climb. Sometimes they're in your way. Sometimes they're a little ahead of you. But they're always above you, striving, and you don't feel secure. You don't feel safe. You're always nervous, and you're constantly striving, trying to get to the top. And at the same time, when you live on the ladder, somebody's always beneath you. That you kind of look down on, I guess, or thinking maybe you're better or ahead of them in whatever situation, like you're above them or something. And they can look up at you and they are waiting for you to fail and to fall so they can jerk you down and get ahead of you and all this. Guys, living on that kind of ladder is exhausting because you're constantly climbing. And here's what else happens. When you're on the ladder, I've yet to see a 2-lane ladder. You don't have any peers. You don't have anybody beside you to hold on to you. If you live life on the ladder, there's no room for anybody else to be there. And you kind of want to get them because you want to get ahead of them because you're trying to climb the ladder. And then when they disappoint you or you get too close to them, maybe you knock them down or you look down on them and there's somebody else you want to get close to that's above you and you try to pull them down to get ahead of them. And then you look around and you realize life's not all it's cracked up to be and you don't have the friends that you wish you had and you wonder why, and it's because you've been climbing the ladder. So the first thing we need to do is get off that ladder. And the other reason that life on the ladder is it's just internal turmoil. Because if you treat people that way, where there's people above you, you got to get ahead of them, and there's people below you, and you got to stay ahead of them. If you live that life thinking that, then other people probably view you that way too, right? So that causes inner struggles and stuff. So there's this constant paranoia, constant turmoil, constant trouble, unrest, striving, pulling, climbing. You're on the ladder. Number one, to stay calm and quiet in your soul, you got to get off the ladder. Refuse it. Verse 1 of Psalm 131 talks about that ladder of life and what it looks like. Look back at me. Verse 1, David, the psalmist here says, Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor my eyes lofty, neither do I concern myself with great matters, nor with things too profound for me. So life off the ladder requires my heart to not be proud. Okay? It's a heart that's not proud. One thing about the Christian life is it drives a stake in the heart of pride. You can't be prideful and be a Christian, because the Christian faith is not a faith of the ladder. Don't work that way. God is not at the top of the ladder saying, come on up, get up here with me. He don't ask us to get there on our own, okay? He pulls us up to where he wants us to be. The symbol of the Christian faith is not a ladder. The symbol of the Christian faith is the cross, okay? It's a cross. Because the Christian faith, it's not about us going up or us getting higher in our own goodness to higher and closer to our Creator, our Father God. Faith is what we need. The glorious news of the gospel is it's not about us going up or down. It's about Christ coming down to us and placing his self on the cross in place of our sins. It's not that we ascend to him. He descends to us. That drives a stake in the heart of pride, because we remember that it's only because of what Jesus did. It's not about anything I've done. It's about what he did. So to get off the ladder is to step away from pride and to walk in humility, saying my heart's not proud because I know that I'm only his because of what he's done anyway. My heart can't be proud in that. And David says, my heart's not proud. My eyes are not haughty. Life off the ladder. When you're on the ladder, you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, constantly trying to get ahead of everybody. And David says, you know what? My eyes aren't haughty. That's life off the ladder, guys. When you're off the ladder, or when you're on the ladder, you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. You're looking at people above you, looking at people below you. But when you're off the ladder, your heart's not proud. You're resting. You can take a deep breath and just relax. And what God has done is so wonderful and secure and peace-giving. And when we're resting in all that, our eyes aren't haughty. We're not looking at other people and comparing ourselves to them. We're looking at other people to see how we can help them. But then look at also what he says in verse 4 that's so countercultural. It so flies in the face of everything that we see talked about today. And he says this, and it's really kind of crazy when you think about who David is. Who's David at this time? He's a king, guys. He's a king. And he says, the king says, I don't get involved in things that are too great or wondrous for me. This is the king of Israel, the great warrior that killed Goliath, the incredible leader and the warrior that killed thousands, and the leader of the nation of Israel, the man after God's own heart here. He says, I don't have it all figured out. There's some things I'm not an expert in. There's some things I just don't know. And there's some things that are too great for me to even try to figure out. So there are things that are too wondrous for me to learn. So I'm not on the ladder feeling like I have to know everything. I'm not on the ladder feeling like I have to prove myself over and over and over again by climbing to the top tier of knowledge or something, okay? There are just some things I don't know. And that can be a struggle. That's what I've been struggling with. There's a lot of things I don't know. I just don't know. I think there are things that many of us just don't know, and that's okay. We can rest in that. That's all right. But that's the opposite of the way things are today in our culture, right? I mean, in our culture, you can Google anything. So you're not really careful about wondering about things. You can become an expert on everything. That's what I'm trying to say. And often because we can Google anything, we think we can be an expert in anything. And you've probably seen this in the middle of the pandemic we're living in right now. I mean, you got some friends or whatever, hadn't read a scientific book or journal since they got out of college, may have not even ever read one in their life before, but they read somebody's post somewhere on social media, and all of a sudden now they're an expert on how infectious diseases spread, right? So, I mean, we've seen these things happen, I'm sure, okay? I read something, and all of a sudden I think I'm an expert. And I'm not the only one who's seen this. A couple years ago, there was a book written by a man by the name of Tom Nichols, pretty fascinating, called The Death of Expertise. just a book, wasn't a Christian book or anything, but it's fascinating because he talks about how we don't have experts anymore because everybody thinks they can be an expert. We don't have experts in our culture anymore because everybody thinks they can be an expert at anything. And he researched and he concluded, this is what he concluded. He said, the more confident you are that you know everything, actually, the more incompetent you are. We think because we can get on the internet and find a YouTube video on how to take apart and put together a transmission, we can do it in our front yard till we dig in there and start doing it, and we know why mechanics are mechanics, and we're not. But I love that thought. The more confident you are that you know everything, actually, the more incompetent you are. The more confident you are, man, I got this figured out. I know how to do it, everything. I've got everything figured out and understood. I know everything. The more incompetent you prove yourself to be. And essentially, speaking about pride, talking about pride, it's saying pride's really dumb. Here's what he writes in his book. He says, and think about people, okay? And tell me if you agree with this, all right? The dumber you are, the more confident you are that you're not actually dumb. That's one to think about. You need to think about that one a little bit. It's kind of like one of those grenade things. It'll blow up here in a second when you really start eating it up, how true that statement is. You ever known somebody who was so certain about their views and they were certainly wrong, but you couldn't convince them of that? That's the opposite of what David's saying in Psalm 131. He's saying he does not have it all figured out. I don't have to have it all figured out. Why? Because I'm not on the ladder. My heart's not proud, my heart's not haughty, or my eyes are not haughty, and there's just some things that I don't have to live with the pressure of knowing. I don't have to know it all. And see, that's one reason, one way our souls can be bumpy and choppy, because we live under this pressure of having to be an expert of everything, and we're constantly going, feeling like we're behind, and we don't know enough, so we constantly try to we just get overwhelmed with the burden that God doesn't even want us to carry. And it feels like you're on the ladder, and it's miserable. So the number one way to calm your soul, quiet your soul, get off the ladder. Second thing, we need to live as a happy child. Okay? Verse 2 would have been great for Mother's Day, but we went a different direction. But verse 2 here, instead of being on the ladder, he's calmed and quieted his soul. In verse 2, surely I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with his mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. Now, from what I understand, never done this, but from what I understand, what I've learned by talking to folks, an unweaned child is constantly frantically moving and crying whenever this child wants to eat, especially when he's expecting to be fed. He cries, and essentially, the child thinks the world revolves around it, and when I cry I get to eat, so when I'm hungry I cry and they feed me, and this child also tends to root around and move around feverishly, just discomforted and trying to eat, and it just can't get content. But then when the child is weaned, the child still depends on the mother, don't get me wrong, but the child enjoys sitting in the mom's lap, and the loving mother is there to just enjoy the presence of the mother. In other words, they love the mother for the mother, not just for what the mother provides. And this child, when the child is weaned, still depends on the mom to feed it and all that. I mean, a weaned child's not going to go out in the backyard and fire up the grill and cook brisket for everybody or something, okay? I mean, that's not what the weaned child does. The weaned child is still dependent on the mom, still has to be fed by the mom, but he's joyful in his dependence, okay? He's joyfully dependent. And that's the way David describes his relationship with God. David says, okay, That's how I am with God. I sit in His arms. I trust Him to feed me. I realize my life He doesn't revolve around my life, but that actually my life revolves around Him. He's the center of my life, and I joyfully am contented to trust Him and be in His arms and trust Him to provide for me. Trust Him to take care of me. I mean, this psalm is essentially saying that we live life on the ladder, and we're filled with this pride when we do that. We're just walking around like a big baby, thinking everything revolves around us. And to mature is to actually be a content child who sits joyful in the Father's lap or in His arms, trusts God to care for us, to feed us, to shepherd us, to love us, and to love us well. He does, doesn't He? But that's to be mature. Jesus, when He walked on the earth, He encouraged us to have a childlike faith, to be content in His arms. So, number 1, get off the ladder. Number 2, be a happy and content child. And then number 3, put your hope in Jesus. Put your hope in Jesus. In the end of the psalm, David just turns and looks at Israel, looks at God's people, and he says, Israel, you're hoping the Lord, hope in the Lord now and forever. Hope in the Lord now and forever. And me, as your pastor, I want to tell you, church, that's my prayer for you. Hope in the Lord. Put your hope in the Lord now and forever. Now and forever. You know, when you're on a plane, it can get kind of scary. I've been on a few flights that have gotten kind of turbulent. You've hit turbulence. But one thing I always look at, it's just me, I don't know, but if I'm on a plane and it starts getting vibrating or doing something funny, I look at the flight attendants. And if they're still up in the aisle doing their thing, I feel pretty good. Okay, all right. If it gets a little worse, and the pilot tells the flight attendants they need to take their seat, then you see them go up there and sit down and buckle up. And I tend to watch anyway, and if they're sitting there reading text or in a magazine looking around or something, I still feel, I feel like things are okay. But boy, when you look up there and they're strapped in and they've got the deer in the headlight looks in their eyes, yikes. It can be kind of scary, can't it? But you see what they're doing, though, when they're doing that? They're exhibiting calmness, okay? When they're sitting down, flipping through the book, I feel like, okay, it's okay to be calm. I can still be calm. They're not overly worried. And that's what this psalm is saying. Put your hope in God. Put your hope in the Lord. That's where we're encouraged to put our trust, because He is always calm. Look to the one who's always calm. He's calm, guys. And in this moment, in all the craziness of whatever's going on in your life, He's calm. He knew this was coming. He knows it's going on, and He's calm. He never hurries. He's never frantic. He's never out of control. He's not having a freak out moment. He's fully at peace. He's fully calm. There's a story in the book of Mark, chapter 4, where Jesus is on a boat with His disciples out in the sea, and the wind came and a storm came up, and man, the waves were beating on the boat and kicking it back and forth and buffeting against it. The Bible says essentially the boat was being ripped apart, though. It was just being ripped apart. The disciples were scared to death, and you know where Jesus is? He's dead. He's sleeping. He's sleeping in the bottom of the boat, sleeping with everything going on around him. He's crazy, and Jesus is taking a nap. Well, the disciples are not super excited about that. They're like, "Go wake him up! Somebody wake him up!" So they get out there and they wake Jesus up. And Jesus looks up at the wind and stuff and the waves and all this stuff, and He says this. It's a very famous verse. He says, "Peace, be still. Peace, be still." And with that word, the wind just stops, the waves flatten out. I'm talking about not even, how normally a pool or something has to calm itself. Oh no, when He spoke those words, the surface of the water was smooth as glass. That's a miracle, isn't it? Just like He calms the winds, just like He can calm those waves, He can calm your soul. He can calm your soul. He can quiet you. He can. Because the God you trust is a God who is calm. The God you trust is the God that is peace. Rest in that. He's the God that calms the wind. He calms the waves, and He can calm the wind and the waves that are in your soul as well. Jesus, in the most intense moment in His life, the darkest, the craziest moment of His life, He actually lived out Psalm 131 in the Garden of Gethsemane. One of the most tumultuous moments in all the history of humanity. Right before Jesus goes to the cross, He spends some time with God praying. He's overwhelmed. And He goes to this place and He talks to His Father in heaven, and He calms and quiets His soul. He does exactly what David wrote in the Psalms here. And Jesus, He reminded Himself of God's plans, and the Father's plans are the best plans, and the Father calms and quiets His soul. Jesus reminded Himself that the Father, God the Father, He's in charge of everything. He's even in charge of the Garden of Gethsemane. He's in charge of what you're going through right now. But Jesus said, in that garden, if there's any way for me not to have to go to the cross, I choose plan B, please. But not as I will, as you will, God. I'm a content child in your arms. I'm a weaned child. I'm a calm and quiet child. And I'll do whatever you tell me. And Jesus became calm. You see, from that moment forward, He set His face toward the cross, and He never wavered again. He had a calm peace about Him from then on. God can give us that same peace, just like He did His Son that day. The authorities came to arrest Jesus in the garden. Judas, his betrayer. I mean, you talk about backstabbing, what that felt like. He walks up to Jesus and betrays Him with a kiss. Jesus is calm. Peter, in that very moment, pulls a sword out and cuts a guy's ear off, and Jesus says, "Put down your sword." He's calm. He's taken away to this crazy trial, and he don't even speak in his defense because he's calm. The prophet Isaiah said of this moment that he'd be led like a lamb to slaughter, and he wouldn't open his mouth like a sheep don't open their mouth before his accusers. He wouldn't open his mouth for his accusers like a sheep wouldn't open the mouth before they were sheared. Because in that moment, Jesus is calm. He's calm. And He goes to the cross, submitting to the will of the Father, even though it was hard, even though it hurt. He was calm. He was quieted because God did that for Him. And that moment on the cross, another hugely tumultuous moment in the history of everybody. All of our sin, all of our shame was placed on Him. All our sin was placed on Him. And we receive His forgiveness. And that's why in this moment we can calm and quiet our souls. We can calm and quiet our souls because we remember that on the cross, all of the turmoil was placed on Jesus. All the shame, all the guilt was placed on Jesus. So now, people of God, you can calm and quiet your soul. Because this moment, whatever you're struggling with this moment, that's not defining you. The moment has already defined you, and that moment was the moment Jesus was on the cross dying for you. So this moment that you find yourself in, this crazy moment, is not when you validate your life or when your life is invalidated. Your life was validated when Jesus put Himself on the cross for you. So you can be calm, you can quiet your soul by remembering everything Jesus did, He did for you. He did it for you. So if you're struggling, if you're going through a difficult time this season and things feel crazy, this moment does not define you. What's already defined you is the moment when Jesus Christ was pierced for your transgressions. He was crucified for your iniquities, and the punishment that brought us peace was placed on Him. As it was on Him, and we receive His forgiveness, so now I can be calm and quiet. How do I calm and quiet my soul? I realize that my job is not who I am. My job doesn't define me. My lack of a job doesn't define me. Jesus defines me. And I realize that the label that other people put on me doesn't define me, because Jesus has defined me. And I realize that whatever happened to my portfolio in the stock market or whatever, that doesn't define me. Jesus has defined me. And because it's Jesus who is my everything and defines me, then that's how I can quiet my soul, how I can calm my soul. Not by looking around you, not by being in the chaos, but being in the calm of the storm, in the middle, and remembering your God is calm, your God is quiet, and when you trust Him, He can calm and quiet your soul. So what do? Well, you get off the ladder. You remind yourself, I don't want to be a big baby where I think the world revolves around me. I want to be a content child. I want to be a good child who's content in the arms of my Father. And I want to put my hope in Jesus, because that's the one that is ultimate calm for me anyway. He took my turmoil away. He took it upon Himself, actually. And that's what this psalm makes me think of. And in thinking of this, I think about that beautiful song, It Is Well With My Soul. The title is pretty awesome when things are crazy. It is well with my soul. I can be calm in this moment. And it's even more powerful when you know the background of the psalm. It was written in the 1800s by a lawyer by the name of Horatio Spafford, and he lived through a very crazy, chaotic time himself. He lived through the Chicago fire, and he lost everything. Everything he had burned up in that fire. So he decided that he and his wife and his 4 daughters were going to go to England and get away from all the craziness. He still had a few business decisions to take care of, so he sent them ahead on a boat. And they were headed to England on this ship, and the ship was hit by another ship and sank. And his wife and his 4 daughters were lost. Only his wife was left. His wife wrote a telegram to him to let him know everything. I mean, think about it. He just lost all of his possessions in a fire. Now he's lost 4 daughters. So he gets things taken care of. He gets on another ship to go meet his wife in England to be with her. And as he's on that ship, he writes the words to It Is Well With My Soul. They're powerful. But when you understand that he is on a ship, he's seeing the sea billows roll. And the words don't minimize the pain of everything he's lost, but he comes to God and he thinks about these things, and he calms and he quiets his soul by remembering everything Jesus had done for him. Think about these words as he wrote them and what had just happened. He lost all of his possessions, lost his 4 daughters, and he was on a ship as he wrote these words. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control, that Christ hath regarded my helpless estate, and shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul. Your soul can be calm. Your soul can be quiet as you put your trust in the Lord, and the one who is calm, the one who embraced all of your turmoil to make you his forever. Put your hope in him. Put your hope in Christ now and forever. And it'll be well with your soul, and you could sing that song too. More than anything, I want it to be well with your soul. I want things to be well with my soul. in these confusing, difficult times. And if you're a child of God, maybe you just need to pray and remind yourself, like David did in this psalm, of the good things God's done and what He's done for you. Let your soul be the eye of the storm and not the chaos that is in the storm, because God can calm your soul. And if you're not a child of God, if you've never asked the Lord to save you, I want to tell you, you've got an opportunity right now to do that. Would you ask Jesus to save you? Oh, what a blessing that'd be. We'd love to hear from you if you did. I pray that you enjoyed this message. I want to thank you for tuning in this week and listening. Pray for us as we decide what we need to do next. We look forward to the day that we can all get together. For Providence Missionary Baptist Church, I'm Brother Mike Hoggard, the pastor there from our house here at the Hoggard home. We appreciate you. God bless you. Have a great week.